Okay, Ian, we want to talk about the industry leader in preparation for the feedback we need for this second assessment task. So can you firstly tell me who you should choose?
Good question, Deb. I think, look, there are probably three things you need to think about. You're going to ask a person some fairly deep and meaningful things about yourself in terms of your own leadership development. So, number one, someone you feel comfortable talking with, who can give you honest and objective feedback about your current state of development and a realistic appraisal of what you're proposing to do. So comfortable with the person. The second thing is that means the person obviously knows you in some kind of relationship to be able to make that judgment. Third thing obviously is that that person has a leadership role because you're asking for their, I guess, professional advice about leadership development. So they don't have to be a CEO, but they do have to have some experience as a leader to enable them to give you advice on your own leadership development. So I think, yeah, three things that are quite important in choosing the person.
That's terrific. And so I've thought about the person and I've made a choice. What do I ask them?
Okay, this is very individual. Everyone's going to ask different things, but let's assume you've done your research for your plan. So you've already got in front of you a 1 or 2 page document that outlines something about your strengths, your weaknesses, and a strategy for enhancing the strengths or diminishing the weaknesses, whatever that might be. And so I guess a critical question to ask the person is my plan realistic in terms of my own self-assessment of my skill set, in terms of the approaches I'm proposing to achieve the competencies or the skills that I think are important. Another critical one is, are my timelines okay? And you say to the leader, look, I've got this great plan, and I think in 2 months' time I'll be an expert in all facets of leadership. And she laughs at you and says, more likely 2 or 5 years. So you're actually getting sensible feedback on the time required to achieve certain skill sets. So they're 2 big ones, but really you need to think about what your plan is proposing, and out of that should arise some really critical questions that you can ask the leader in the interview or the discussion or the Skype.
So what's the best way to connect with them? Okay,
so the gold standard obviously is that you meet with the person face to face over a cup of coffee, and it's a very relaxed, time unlimited discussion. Now that's not always possible, but if it is, sit down, just casually talk through what you're proposing to do and invite their honest feedback on whether they think that what you're doing is appropriate. If you can't do the one-on-one, then perhaps a Skype conversation. Skype's getting better and better each year, so it's quite reasonable to think that you could sit down in front of a computer screen and talk to someone on the other side of the world. And many of you are from different parts of the world, so don't feel that you've got to have a conversation with someone in your current city. Go wherever you like to get your information. If that's not possible, then I guess you can email. Now, email is probably the least desirable because it's not very interactive. You send a question or a document, but you're not getting a very rich interaction with a person. But if that's what you're stuck with, then you work with that.
That's good advice. And just finally then, I get all this advice, I choose this wise person, they've given me some really constructive feedback. How do I then integrate it into my final report?
Well, you've gone to this person because you're seeking some advice on how to improve your plan. So what we would like to see in your report is not what the person said and how I responded, but what you changed in your plan as a consequence of talking with the person. So I mentioned earlier that maybe your timeline was a bit out of whack. So in your report you might say, as a consequence of the conversation with the leader, I realised that my timelines were far too short and I've extended them to 2 years. You might make comment about the fact that the leader said that the approaches you're taking to develop your skills were a bit unusual or unorthodox for this industry, or perhaps the leader pointed you to some available resources that you weren't aware of. So in the report we're looking for, what have you changed or improved in your plan having spoken to this expert?
That's great. I'm sure that'll be really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Deb.